Welcome to All Things Work. I'm your host, Anne Sparaco. We all have our New Year's resolutions, and our resolution this year is to keep up with the top trending HR trends for the year of 2025 and how we should prioritize those trends to keep the world of work moving forward. And joining us to talk about this exact topic is Rick Hammell, founder and CEO of Helios. Rick, welcome to All Things Work.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
So let's kick things off. Tell me about Helios and, why you founded it and what exactly is your mission statement?
Sure. So Helios is a global workforce management platform focused on simplifying how companies manage their global teams. And it's a platform that's powered by AI. And our goal here is to create equitable opportunity for all businesses to be able to compete in the global marketplace. And what that means is going global is complicated. And we want to make sure that we're simplifying that as much as possible to allow companies to say, look, if I'm a CEO with 10 employees, or if I'm a payroll professional with 20 years of experience in 50 countries, I want a platform that's going to be intuitive, simple, so I can focus on, more of the strategic initiatives in my business, not necessarily the mandates of administrative nightmares. So we're focused on simplifying as much as possible to create equitable opportunities for businesses to expand.
What you're talking about, such a complex, big thing to tackle. Simplifying is kind of the best answer. And I understand that you have a background in other roles involving HR. How have those roles really motivated you to establish Helios?
So my background is HR. I started in HR. I remember my first HR role was an HR generalist. I got all the way up to the VP of talent acquisition and HR operations. And I realized there was much more that HR could do than just be the people department. It really could be a strategic partner to the executive team. And I felt like there was a way to do that through simplification and making sure that businesses understood how talent management or how they looked at hiring talent around the world, how that actually can bring success to their business. And so years ago, I was head of HR for a government contractor. We had to deploy talent in Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and Japan. And I remember the CEO walking over to me and saying, "Hey, we just hired a bunch of people in these countries. Figure out how to pay them." I remember calling my payroll company I was using at that time and said, "Hey, I can't find the drop down for Saudi Arabia." And they're like, we don't do global payroll. That's not what we do. So I had to figure it out. I had to figure out how to onboard employees in those particular countries. I had to figure out how to pay them compliantly, get money moved in those particular countries, even processing visas because we had a lot of expats given our government contract. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress. There was not a handbook out there. And by the way, this is when the global payroll was Excel files and emails. It wasn't as sophisticated as today. And so over time, I said, look, there's got to be a better way to do this. One of my organizations I had founded before was what they called an employer of record. And that gave businesses the ability to hire talent where they didn't have local entities. And I grew that business very successfully over the last 10 years. And then I realized that, hey, nothing just the employer of record piece of it. Companies all expand very differently. Now, not everyone has the same paths. Not everyone starts the same way. And I wanted to create a platform that was really focused on meeting customers where they're at and making it a lot easier. And sometimes companies start with contractors, sometimes they use an employer of record, and sometimes they already establish themselves in those particular countries instead of payroll. And so I want to say, look, there's got to be an opportunity where companies can have a global view. It can help them with compliance. It can simplify steps, taking the onboarding process in France, for example, 15 steps down to 3. And then really making sure that I can know that I'm confident what it's going to be, that's going to be done correctly, and then I can focus on my business. And that's what we do here at Helios. It's really just from the experience of being in HR, being a practitioner of myself, someone that lived and breathed in HR and payroll.
And you know that's going to work because you personally experienced it. You've seen it from different sides. So I love that. And so in the planning phase of our episode today, you mentioned to producers that you see HR trends across 5 specific realms. So we're going to dive into those 5 specific realms and let's go over them real quick. So it's the return to office. That's what we're seeing a lot, return to work. The generation gap, AI impacting businesses, global business, and a new White House administration. So there's a lot to go in. So if it's okay, we'll jump right into the return to office, return to work. We're seeing a lot of hybrid models becoming popular across workplaces. And we're also seeing those return to work mandates. I even saw a recent headline saying Oklahoma's governor just signed an executive order mandating state workers return to the office or field locations. And it comes as major corporations are really pushing for that full time RTO. What do you anticipate for 2025 regarding this?
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of trends with that, but you have to understand that there are also quite a few businesses that have seen a lot of success from actually being remote. So you're going to have the organizations who have said, look, this is how we've always traditionally done it, and this is how we want to continue to do it. This is how we've been set up for success. And look, if it works for your business, it works for your business. But I think that what we've seen is employees and the talent that's in the workforce today, they want to be able to have that flexibility. They've seen that they have that hour and a half it took them to get to work every single day, that they have an hour and a half back with their families. And that's really important to them. And so, although you're going to see a lot of pushback to the office, you're also going to see a lot of turnover because there's a lot of employers out there today that are saying, "Hey, if you don't work remotely, we'll hire you." So you're going to see some of that. I think part of what organizations have to think about is why are you wanting employees to come back? Sometimes, and I've seen a lot of the headlines, it's we want to make sure we're building a strong culture. We want to make sure we have a lot more connectivity. We want people to be more bought into what we're doing. There's other ways as HR leaders that we can support businesses in doing that.
Mhm,
Now, not every business can be remote. There are jobs that you have to be there physically. And I understand that. And that's not the companies that we're talking about. The
mhm.
companies that we're talking about are, hey, the ones that were working remotely during COVID, it was successful. They had a lot of growth. And businesses thrive with that. Employees thrive with it, and and businesses thrive with that. I think that the trend is going to be more hybrid. But what you're also going to see with this incoming administration, a lot of companies are still also going to be hired remotely, but those remote talent is going to be outside of the US. It's going to be talent they're going to have in Mexico, talent they're going to have in Canada or in Europe or in Asia. And I think that's where there's kind of a difference in message. Employers are going to say, look, we have a high concentration of employees in, for example, Chicago, and we want everyone to come into the office in Chicago, but everyone else where we don't have offices, they can work remotely. I'm going to push back a little bit on that as well. The amount of money that we spend on an office space. Imagine taking that investment and investing into talent, either hiring more talent, creating more business, more jobs, or being able to reinvest that into your employees. I think businesses that have been able to do that have seen much more growth and much more success because it's not, they look, we're going to spend the money regardless. Why not invest into our people and into our technology and into our infrastructure, not necessarily office space?
And then also it impacts like workers with disabilities. We've had conversations before about how remote or hybrid work really helps workers with disabilities as well, and that broadens a diverse talent pool to pick from. So there's a lot of factors going into it. That could be a whole nother episode for that we could talk about. So going on to topic number two, that's the generation gap. So we're in this really unique scenario where we have the most generations we've seen in the workforce. It's about six generations, I think. It varies obviously per industry, but the overall workforce in the United States, that's what we're seeing. So you're seeing a lot of people on the edge of retirement who may be going into phased retirement, but they're sticking around because they just love their work or they feel like they have to work. And then there are new graduates, new emerging professionals coming in every day to industries across different platforms. And they are all coming in with new perspectives, different experiences, just that overall diversity there. With that gap, because we're seeing the need for upskilling in certain generations and we're seeing the difference in how generations even communicate. What are you saying? How can HR pros really prepare for emerging professionals coming in and then older generations, staying in the workforce?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question, and it's a profound one because I remember my father's generation. I know my generation, and then now I'm just having conversations with my nieces and nephews who are now going into the workforce. And it's a very different mindset. It's a very different culture. My father's generation was, I'm a company man. I'm going into the business. I'm going to work these hours. I'm going to stay till I retire, and I might be there for years. My generation is kind of a hybrid between that. Like we have some flexibility. We maybe need to stay at jobs for 20 something years, but we had more flexibility, but we were still looking for that. And then my nephews and my nieces, their mindset is, I'm working remotely. That's all I've known. Why am I have to go to an office? Why am I commuting here? I can get the job done faster, and I'm going to use all the tools to be able to get it done faster. And you're still going to pay me 8 hours, even if I get the job done in 2 hours. So the mindset's very different. And I think as HR professionals, we have to understand that we have to be chameleons in how we communicate and how we actually put things out there. I remember the days where we were doing benefit and open enrollments. Benefits were really important to my generation, very much into my parents' generations. Um, Benefits are not as important to my nieces and nephews. And also me being Asian, but right now they don't really care about that. So when they're talking about compensation, they don't really care how much the company is contributing to healthcare. They want to know what's going to be the bottom line. They also have now, it's very interesting. I just had this conversation over the Christmas holiday. I'm speaking with my nephew, and he goes, I'm not sure why I'm not getting compensated for my commute to work. For me, about me, I had to take a step back and say, well, you commute to work to get paid.
Right.
You don't get paid just to go to commute. And he goes,
Mhm.
well, if I work from home, I can take those hours and provide that to the company. So why would they want me to come into the office, waste time, and they can get a better bang for their buck if I'm using that hour and a half to commute to be able to help them achieve their goals? So it's a very different mentality. And I think as HR professionals and leaders, and as a CEO myself, we have to take a step back and we have to listen to how do we communicate? How do we make sure that everyone understands what we're looking to accomplish? Even goal settings. Talk about compensation and bonuses. Back again using my father's generation, bonuses were tied to the company's goals and someone ignores when really the company's goals. If the company doesn't hit the goals, not everyone got bonuses. Well, when you talk to my nieces and nephews when they're talking about compensation negotiations, they're saying, well, if I do my job and I achieve all my goals, regardless of the company did, I should still get my bonus. So looking at it from an HR perspective is how do we make sure that we can attract talent in that generation and that we can maintain that talent in that generation, but also still maintain the same decorum that we've had that made us successful as a business and not overall change our policies and procedures, but also making sure that we seem like an attractive employer to that generation as really important. So being that chameleon, I think, is going to be really important and a big challenge for a lot of individuals because they're used to, again, going back to the conversation of bringing people back to the office. Now, traditionally, the Gen Zs and the Gen X or millennials, that's what we are used to. That's where we work. That's the majority of our careers. Now attracting talent is not actually working that direction, and they're fighting against that. So you've got to a little bit balance that somewhat. And if it worked, honestly, I don't think it's going to be able to maintain that talent based on what they're used to, how they enter the actual workforce.
And even from your perspective with Helios, from that global perspective, you're not just talking about age differences, but you're talking about cultural differences as well. That changes a lot of, what's the priority for the individual employee, in which, that might be seen as a benefit or, something that or they would prefer. Do you think feedback, just kind of via certain surveys or other ways, do you think feedback is really key to this and listening to that feedback?
I do. I think feedback's really important from employees. I do think that you have to take a step back and make sure employees feel comfortable enough to get feedback as an employer. As much as you may say that this is anonymous, a lot of employees have doubt that that is correct. And so making sure that you create a safe environment so that you can get that feedback. And I think it's also really important that employers, HR, payroll, we take action on that feedback, right? We just don't want to put out a survey and ask what they think. We should talk about it, bring a town hall together and communicate that. By the way, that we just recently did that within our organization as well. And the feedback that we got with that was from all generations was, not only do we want to do this, but we also want to hear how you're going to action this feedback. And sometimes that action may be, this is not the right time to do that. But some of it may be, here are the steps that we're going to do to get to that point. In all generations, and Helios, even being a new organization, we have all of our generations because we need all of that experience and in what we do. They said, look, we need to make sure we understand what you're going to do. We want transparency. Now, I, as a leader, I like to tell my staff, I say transparency does not mean you just tell us how you feel. Transparency also means we tell you how we feel and what we need to do to collaborate, to work together, and to be better, and to make sure we're setting all parties up for success.
Something our CHRO even calls more Gen Z and younger emerging professionals, he calls them digital natives because they're so good with AI. So let's transition that into our next topic of artificial intelligence. We know everybody like their ears prick up when they hear that. They're like, "Oh no, AI is going to take my job." But that's not really the case. AI may replace a lot of jobs, and it already actually has. Like, if we're being honest with ourselves, it's already been replacing millions of jobs. It's going to replace millions more. But here's the opportunity it's also creating. It's creating more jobs for people to do. The thing is, upskilling and reskilling is a huge factor in the world of AI, especially as we enter 2025, where we're seeing a lot of trends pop up. We had ChatGPT for a while. Okay. And then now we're going to see so many more new things come into play with how businesses will actually integrate it. Can you talk about that perspective a little bit on AI?
I think AI is the future of work, to be very honest. And I think that let's be frank. I love the fact that you were being honest about it. AI is going to replace jobs, and it's already doing that. That is a fact. But I think it's also the responsibility of employers to upskill their talent to be able to support them in what that looks like. I was able to write essays. Again, dating myself 15 years ago, maybe took a couple hours to do. I can now with I can write that out in a couple of minutes. And so I can get the job done faster. What that means is that businesses can be more efficient. That doesn't mean that it's going to get rid of talent. A really good business is going to leverage AI, but also leverage its talent to make sure it's being more strategic in what they do. So as I'm upskilling my talent, as I'm bringing that talent on board, I'm also leveraging to be able to do more of the job and make sure they can do things more successfully. And look, AI is going to continue to grow. I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg with AI. I think AI in payroll, AI in HR, AI in the rules and regulations, updating, employment agreements. Those things are just the tip of the iceberg of what AI can do and how it can leverage, especially compliance from an HR perspective on a global scale. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see where that's going to go. And because it's going to be, a great invention, just like every other change in history with work, this is going to create a lot more jobs for everybody to be prepared for the next generation.
Exactly, exactly. So it's good to see it as an opportunity rather than let fear drive it. Definitely be motivated by that opportunity to see what you can do next. I love that. So we touched a little bit on the global business impact that 2025 could bring. But to give a little bit more specific, a couple things come to mind, and those are the global or international compliance and payroll outsourcing. Now you're the expert here, so I'm going to let you take this topic and kind of run with it, so that you can tell us a little bit about what we can really should be paying attention to and prioritizing for 2025.
Yeah, so you're going to see there's going to be a lot of rules and regulations coming through. If you remember a couple of years ago, they had the GDPR scare where everyone was worried about data privacy and what that's going to look like and how that's going to affect their businesses. Other regions are starting to create more rules and regulations regarding data privacy. From what we can see today, it's not as stringent as GDPR. So GDPR is the strictest. If you follow that process, you should be compliant. But you're also going to see there's going to be leveraging AI. There's rules and regulations on how companies can leverage AI that are coming out. There's rules and regulations on how money is moved between countries. Cryptocurrency is a big thing. It's a big topic that's being discussed right now in compensation for employees. And so what that looks like and how is that going to be regulated? Is that going to be approved? Is that going to be, can we legally do that? Those are things that companies are going to have to look at in 2025. Helios, by the way, we launched our cryptocurrency payments for payroll. People over in 125 countries. But we also understand the rules and regulations, what that means, and we want to make sure we stay on top of that from a compliance perspective. I think also businesses also have to start thinking about what is it going to take to maintain that talent abroad. With the new administration coming in today, we're already having quite a lot of conversations with businesses who are saying, look, it's going to be pretty expensive to hire or continue to maintain talent in the US. It's going to be more effective for us to hire abroad, especially with possible tariffs coming in place. They want to know, okay, how do I make sure that I can build product, manage product outside of the US as well? And so they're hiring talent to support that outside the US. And so now they're going, okay, what does that mean from a compliance perspective? What does that mean from a money movement perspective? What do I have to do to make sure that I'm not violating any rules or regulations? And that is where we're coming in and we're supporting our customers and saying, okay, what are you looking to accomplish? How are you looking to accomplish it? And these are the rules and regulations that you have to maintain in these particular countries. And also, I think it's important to educate yourself because from an HR perspective, and here's one of those roles that I talked about before. Um, Sometimes employees do take advantage when they know that you don't know the rules and regulations of those countries. So it's important to have the right partner to make sure that you are on a solid path, a great foundation within your business to make sure you don't get taken advantage of as well.
And so mentioned, a new White House administration coming in for 2025. And, we saw in 2024 throughout the entire election year that, civility was really taking a hit among so many Americans. SHRM launched its civility index research campaign, and we found recently, actually following Election Day, American workers were experiencing nearly 223 million acts of incivility per day in everyday life and in the workplace. And that can vary from just people being rude to each other, people being physically aggressive, or just completely ignoring a coworker or a friend due to political differences. And we found in the research, people were pointing to social and political viewpoint differences as the top driver for incivility. And we have this new administration coming in, and there's a lot of people who are disagreeing, not just in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, but across the nation about what we should do moving forward. How do you see civility reflected in 2025?
I think we have to remember. I think sometimes we'll use the term woke culture. I never thought being polite was woke. I thought it's what I was taught by my parents and my grandparents. That's what you do. You be polite, you be respectful. We are humans. We're going to have disagreements with everybody. And look, I don't agree with everything my neighbors that thinks of does in their life, but I respect that that's their life and their decisions. And so that's where I come in. It's like, look, I'm going to have a different viewpoint, but at the end of the day, you treat people the way that you want to be treated. I think that's really important. And from a business perspective, we have to remember that. And I think sometimes is if you agree with me, we're friends, and if you don't agree with me, we're enemies. At the end of the day, and this is just from an American viewpoint, we're all Americans, and we have to be able to come together and say, okay, how do we go through this? The administration's going to be there for 4 years. We got through it before, so if you've got concerns behind that, we'll get through it again. But at the end of the day, there was an election. There was a politician who won. Agree with or disagree. I'm not going to give my political viewpoint on that, but I do think that it's really important that we walk in and say, okay, we may have disagreements on politics, but where do we agree? Where can we find common ground and where can we move forward? And I actually believe I actually like having conversations, political conversations, because I'm really open to other people's opinions and I want to hear because I don't know everything. I think civility also means being open to what other people may think. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but having same conversations and understanding how did you get here and how did we get here or how do we people think this way, and then you can come with your own conclusions. But do not judge because you don't need to judge yourself. Not everyone's correct. I think you have to walk in with open eyes and open ears and say, look, how do we do this?
Johnny always says, exercise that empathy muscle. And I love that he says that. So we tackle a lot of topics. I just want to leave off with just one brief piece of advice you may have for people who are entering 2025 who feel like this list is just so long and they're wondering how the heck do they keep up? What's your one piece of advice to really push through and make a successful 2025?
The best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So you can't do everything at once. As much as we want to check those boxes off on our list. But to do it successfully, you've got to eat that elephant one bite at a time, and then figure out what works. And by the way, some things you may want to do may not work, and you're going to take a step back, and you're going to reevaluate and then change. You never want to be, I always like, I say this joke all the time. You never want to be the Titanic. You don't want to see the iceberg and continue to go. Make sure you slow down, stop, and reevaluate. And then if you need to make a shift, then you make a shift. I think that's really important for any business, from HR to the CEO to the operations team. You got to think about how you actually look at it and eat that elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, Anne Lamott, the author says, bird by bird, take it bird by bird. I love that so much. So thank you, Rick, for sharing your experiences and your insights with us today. We truly appreciate it as we go head into 2025. Appreciate it.
Pleasure was mine. Thank you for having me.
All right, we have new content each week with a newsletter and the latest research on these big topics, especially coming up for 2025. So head to shrm.org/all things work to get all of your content, and follow us on social media. Like, share, and even comment. We want you to be part of the conversation. That's it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next time.
SHRM.